Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for the Wednesday episode of the North Shore Drive podcast by Christopher Carter, our Steelers insider. Christopher, I don't know that you and I have sat in this spot in like a month, just given the way the calendar has worked out. You were in Ireland, and I was off for a week, and then you had Ross Tucker last week. Things have been all jumbled, so I'm excited to get back into it with you. How are you?
I'm doing great, Adam. It's always fun to do a show with you, sir. But you know, a lot has happened in that past month, the ups, the downs, and currently things have been more on the downside of things. But still a lot to break down for the Steelers. They got a huge Sunday night matchup against the Packers. We just got done talking to Mike Tomlin on Tuesday, so a lot to look over.
Yes, we've got a lot to discuss. We're going to get into the offensive line and the secondary in particular. What's working on the offensive line? What's not in the secondary? What growth are we seeing? What maybe a lack of growth we're seeing from some guys? Lots to digest there. Before we do, we want to remind you that the show is presented by FanDuel. We also want to thank our sponsor, Edgar, Snyder and Associates. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment is over? Who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. Insurance companies, doctors do. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, call Edgar, Snyder and Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the work comp rights you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Chris, the blocking has unquestionably made strides since week one, particularly in the pass blocking where it seemed like Aaron Rodgers was under siege constantly against the Jets. Hasn't taken nearly as much pressure the last couple of weeks. But the Steelers are also kind of settling into these heavier sets with multiple tight ends and even throwing Spencer Anderson in there on a handful of occasions. So how much do you think the protection from the young offensive linemen who are kind of the future of this team has improved versus you just got more guys in there to block?
I mean, even when they had more guys in the block before, they still weren't playing that well. But the guys are performing better, and it's across the board, to be honest. Broderick Jones is more settled into his role. And these were things that we said, hey, give this group time. It takes all offensive lines times to gel, figure out each other, get on the same pace. And you're seeing it happen with these guys right in front of your eyes with not just the decreased amount of pressures that they're allowing, but the arrival of the Steelers' run game. And yes, Spencer Anderson, Darnell Washington, all of these guys play an extra role in that. But the offensive line is winning their matchups more consistently, and that's been a big boost for the Steelers in these early matchups. I mean, right now the Steelers have the number 11 scoring offense in the NFL. If you had told me that happened, I'd have said, hey, get off of week one, buddy, or A or B, you're drunk. But they're right now well overperforming what was kind of expected of them in this game. Right now, they're the sacks per game rate, they're fifth best in the NFL, and then sack percentage on per dropbacks, they're ninth best in the NFL. Those are all really good rates. And yes, there's other game plans drawn into it. There's a quick passing game that certainly plays a factor. Aaron Rodgers is being smart, but you know what? Every team deploys something like that at some point in time. That's what the Bengals did. They went for a quick passing game a lot of times on Thursday night. That's what the Browns try to do for Dylan Gabriel. That's what most teams try to do to TJ Watt, period. So you can't really, count against the Steelers for them doing what other teams do all the time.
You mentioned that Aaron Rodgers with the quick throws is helping this group. I think he's also a little bit more mobile than I expected him to be, Chris. Because there's the quick. I think Amazon was doing the package during the game the other night of 2 seconds to throw, 1.7 seconds to throw, and that's certainly a component of it. But there's also especially some of these bigger plays. He's been scrambling pretty well and finding where to go behind this offensive line. How much is he maybe been a little bit more mobile, or is it just a matter of him kind of knowing where his blockers are going to be and feeling that out a little bit better so that he can get away from trouble by kind of having a better read on his guys?
I think part of it is just his IQ as a quarterback and as an NFL player. He can understand where stuff is coming from half the time, and he can understand not only what to call and what to adjust, but also when, hey, I need to get the ball at this point in time or I'm going to get wrecked. And I think that's certainly a big part of it too, is Aaron Rodgers He doesn't take a lot of bad sacks. Whereas like, when Kenny Pickett was in Pittsburgh, there were times Kenny Pickett would spin into a sack that wasn't even there. And there's times when Justin Fields or Russell Wilson would hold on to the ball just way too long. And you'd be like, dang it. Like that sack really isn't on the offensive line. But you don't see too many of those sacks to Aaron Rodgers. He protects himself. He understands what he's got to do. And I think that's a big part of what the Steelers kind of need right now. They need their guys, their quarterback to help, but that helps sometimes get an offensive line to be confident. Marquise Pouncey, David Castro, Marcus Gilbert, that crew in the 2010s, they had a veteran, Ben Roethlisberger, and that certainly helped them find their footing. But eventually, when they did, they became arguably the best, easily one of the best offensive lines in football. And that's what the Steelers are hoping can happen with this group, and that this is just a starting point for these guys as a starting five.
I want to narrow in on the tackles, Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu. You mentioned that we've seen progress from them. How far are we from you feeling good about them as opposed to maybe just feeling better? Because I remember after week one, Broderick Jones gave up those 3 sacks against the Jets, and I remember saying he's not going to do that every week. It's got to get better from here, and it has. And I think you can feel solid about that. But how far is he from being maybe that long-term answer at that position that people were hoping he would be when they drafted him?
I mean, the thing is that I think his potential is still very much higher than it is. Like I don't think he's close to his potential yet, but I think that he is right now a decent tackle. Like he is not, I wouldn't call him good just yet. He's decent, but decent is a lot better than what they've had for several years now at left tackle. And so decent is going to feel like great to a lot of people in Pittsburgh. And I think there's an important distinction there. But he's coming along. And here's the other thing about this is that, again, these guys are all young. Everyone, was drafted at like 21 or younger, except for Mason McCormick. He was a bit older. But like they're figuring themselves out. They're figuring these things out. And I think that's the thing for the Steelers offensive line is that if they're figuring it out right now, if they're taking those steps forward, you're hoping that by next year, they can be in the process of just being a collective, consistently above average unit. And then in the years after that, they eventually become a collectively consistent elite unit. And that's the trajectory you want to be on as far as a starting point for 6 games with this group together. I think they're at a good place.
Steelers are 3.5-point underdogs, according to our friends at FanDuel. So if you're looking to place a wager this week, make sure you check them out over on the FanDuel sports betting app. Chris, I also wanted to ask you about Isaac Seumalo because we both do different forms of grades posts. You kind of do yours more on film study. I look at PFF grades, and we both put those on Post-Gazette.com every week. One thing that stood out to me in doing my work was Isaac Seumalo is the top graded offensive lineman in this group. He tends to get lost in the shuffle because I think we all know that the long-term future of the Steelers is dependent on these younger guys panning out. Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier. So maybe I'm guilty of this. Maybe we're all guilty of this, of kind of focusing on those 4 guys in terms of whether this offensive line is working or not. But Isaac Seumalo has been a solid player for them as well. Can you speak to the value he's bringing to the table and potentially playing for another contract with the Steelers? Because we do know that his free agency deal is up at the end of this year.
I mean, he's a solid vet. He's helping balance things out next to Broderick Jones. He's making good blocks. He's athletic for an older offensive lineman. He's been pretty solid. I wouldn't put him as the best offensive lineman right now. That honestly might be the other guard, Mason McCormick. He is just bulldozing.
I was going to ask you about him next. Right. Yeah.
He has just been evil in the trenches, and I think, and when you look at the numbers, the rushing efficiency numbers, and what gaps they target, when you look at Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, it's off in the right side. It's between McCormick and Fautanu. Now, when I asked Mike Tomlin about this, he kind of blew it off like, yeah, that's the collective. It's not those 2 guys individually. And I'm like, I'm not saying it definitely is, but obviously something's working over there when they're averaging like 8-9 yards a pop when they run between those guys. And so, Seumalo's doing a good job. I think he's being the stable veteran that they need him to be. I think that he blocks in space well. I think that he's able to anchor down well. He's able to minimize his fundamental mistakes. But he's also doing what he's kind of supposed to do. And I don't know if that's I honestly think that left guard is going to be a real target for the Steelers in this upcoming draft class. Not in the first round or the second round, but maybe like third, fourth, fifth round. They try to get a left guard that they can like train up to eventually be a starter that takes over the role from Seumalo, because right now they got other things that I think they're looking to bring in or keep as a front office. But right now I'm impressed by really the entire group as a whole. Zach Frazier has been good again. Fautanu has been on a steady climb upwards. These are all really good signs for the offensive line. And to me, again, I said before the season, this is not your Super Bowl championship window team. This is not a team that's going to be in the serious contention for that. I think they can win 11 games max. They can maybe win a playoff game and get there. But the bottom line for this team that you wanted to do is you wanted to develop this offensive line. You wanted this offensive line to run block better, pass block better, and set yourself up so that if you do find that franchise quarterback in the draft soon, you have a plan and you have a group ready to help them.
How much credit does Mason or does the staff, the coaching staff, deserve for developing Mason McCormick? Because we talk a lot about the guys that don't pan out. We talk about those later round draft picks that just kind of completely flame out with ever making an impact. They found a starting offensive lineman in the fourth round. Kind of speaking to what you're saying, maybe they can find another one. Maybe that will be the strategy going into this coming draft. I think the experience with Mason McCormick is what would make you confident in saying something like that. So is that a point where we need to give Mike Tomlin and his staff credit for saying, hey, we found a guy? Granted, I think he was a little bit older coming out of, what was it, South Dakota State. So yeah, he had a lot of pedigree, and so he should be a little bit more developed than some of these other guys his age. But still, getting a small college guy to produce at the next level is an impressive feat, even if there are some other draft talents that haven't quite impressed as much in recent years.
Yeah, I think that's the thing here. When you look at Mason McCormick, he certainly brings his experience. But you know what? There were times that experience was not helping him last year, and he had to get sharper, and he had to look out for different things the teams are doing. And coaching is certainly helping that. I'm always going to lean to the players being the biggest impacts on a game or a situation or anything like that. I think that the players are the ones that determine that stuff, but coaching just frames you up, gives you the chance to go out and compete, go out and perform. And I think they've done a good job with asking him to do that. But I'm not going to put, I'm not going to, say that Mason McCormick has also figured everything out either. I think that he's still a work in progress, but I think in general that the offensive line, like Pat Meyer, the coaches, they're doing their job. These guys are getting better, and they're getting better at a consistent rate. I think that's a really good thing for the Steelers, and if they can keep that up, they can kind of all trend towards in a positive way.
We're going to discuss this porous secondary in the next segment. Before we do, I want to thank another couple of sponsors here. Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci, they're Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys, standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers with over 85 years of experience. Visit them online at sdklaw.com. We also want to thank Bolivian Numismatic Rarities. Got old gold or jewelry collecting dust? Turn it into instant cash safely and securely at Bolivian Numismatic Rarities right here in Pittsburgh's Shadyside neighborhood. Gold prices are at historic highs, and ONR pays top dollar for your unwanted gold, silver, and coins. Stop by their Shadyside Gallery at 5833 Ellsworth Avenue or visit onrcoins.com to learn more. That's onrcoins.com or call 412-900-COIN today. That's 412-900-COIN. We will be right back. Second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner, joined by Christopher Carter for our Wednesday edition. Chris, there's a lot to talk through in terms of the secondary. I think we've talked about since the Bengals game who's to blame. I kind of want to widen the aperture a little bit to the defense as a whole over the course of these 6 games that they've played so far, heading toward the halfway point of the season. Who do you think is struggling most in their role in this secondary? What you're expecting from him versus what you're getting, because obviously they all have different talent, skill levels, all that type of stuff. But just put simply, in terms of what you wanted to see from this guy going into the season versus how he's producing, is it Darius Slay with his, big 1-season price tag brought in to kind of be, maybe a finishing piece for this group? Is it Joey Porter Jr. with the big expectations of what he could develop into, what the Steelers invested in him becoming maybe their future number 1 guy? Is it Jalen Ramsey is just the household name that you made the big swing with, or is it someone else?
It's Darius Slay, in my opinion. I look at these guys and the way they're playing, and I see Joey Porter Jr., coming back from injury and battling and doing a really good job taking on guys. And even with those 2 penalties that he took on Thursday Night Football, he still only allowed 21 yards receiving. Wasn't a terrible game from him, not a good game, but not a terrible game. Jalen Ramsey got cooked quite a bit, and I think that's a shame. But Jalen Ramsey was at least in the vicinity of things. He was able, when he was getting beat, it was like legit. Okay, just really good play on your part. But then there was Darius Slay, who I just gave up. He has yet to show me what he can consistently do in man coverage. He gets one-on-one on a key 3rd and 8 with Yoshivas and gets cooked right off the line. Like there's no mitigating it. He was done, toast, and it was easy for the quarterback to see him, get the ball to him, and you get a big gain on a 3rd and long already. And I think that's the thing that's disappointing is Slay is supposed to be so much better than that to let that happen. And look, he could get better. He could come out and say, hey, we're just gonna have a better approach to these situations. But I look at how things have started to play out, and I think that Darius Slay cannot cover in man, and man is a big part of what the Steelers want to do this year. So they have to figure out something to do at cornerback if Darius Slay can't do that anymore.
Let's talk about Joey Porter Jr. What do you think his remaining upside is? Does he still have the bona fide number 1 corner in him, or is he always going to be that guy who does some things pretty well? Maybe you don't notice a lot of them because they're not throwing his way when he is doing things well, but he still has these flaws like the grabbiness, the penalties. Is that always going to be who he is? Like maybe that number 2 corner, that guy that you look at and say, man, he's got all the tools, but he's never quite going to get there? Or do you still have hope considering he's only in his 3rd season?
I think Joey Porter Jr. is still doing all right for himself. I think that he's getting he's getting beat, here and there with the penalties. But like he shut down Jerry Jeudy to the point where he made Jerry Jeudy very frustrated. He took over. He didn't give up a big play outside. He gave up one play to Jamar Chase late, and that was a mental error. But like when it came to man on man, like he was holding it down. And yes, he got tagged for 2 penalty calls. But I also thought that the 2 penalty calls, one of the 2 penalty calls was very soft. Especially considering how much the Bengals receivers just push off all the time. But I don't have as much issue with Joey Porter Jr. I think that he could have been better, but I also think that he is still on his way to being a really good cornerback.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think, he's one of those guys that always looks better in the data than he does with the ball skills. That's been true about him kind of going back to Penn State when he wasn't generating turnovers and that type of thing. That frustrated a lot of people. But when you looked at how many times he's thrown at, how many completions he allows, those numbers tend to be, pretty solid at the end of a full season. And he has also missed time to injury this year, Chris. So I don't know that he's had the chance to kind of settle in to the groove that maybe he will if he gets a little more time here. I also wanted to ask you about the safeties, Chris. How did they factor into this conversation for you? I think we spent a lot of time talking about the corners in the days since the loss on Thursday Night Football, but obviously there were some big changes. In your grades post, you had DeShon Elliott as not having a good game. Juan Thornhill's another addition. So, for all the ink that we've spent the last couple of years defending Minkah Fitzpatrick and talking about that safety group, how is this group performing without him?
Yeah, I mean, they could use him. I can say that much. I think Juan Thornhill's doing a solid job keeping the back end tied up for a little bit. But they're rotating him a lot because they're not sure if he can do it all the time. I don't think Chuck Clark is the guy you want back there. I think Chuck Clark you want up in the box. But if you put him in the box, where you're going to put DeShon Elliott, and I think that's the problem here. They don't have that really good rangy free safety. I think Juan Thornhill could be a good free safety, but I'm talking about a rangy guy that can take over the middle part of the field and just make it a nightmare for defenses. They don't have that guy in their secondary. So I look at that and I think the safety room could still use some work. It's maybe they get some additions in free agency. But I do think that, when you look at Juan Thornhill, it makes sense. DeShon Elliott makes sense, but the guys behind them, I think it kind of put them in a tough spot sometimes. And there's just certain like zone pinches and certain reads that you used to get with Minkah Fitzpatrick that you don't get anymore. And that's stuff that has to get worked through.
get you out of here on this, Chris. Brandin Echols was a guy you did like his performance. You suggested in your grades post that it might be time for him to get a little bit of time at corner over Darius Slay. What do you like about what you've seen from his game so far? I think the thing that stood out to me in the data is doing a nice job, limiting completions to, where they are and not giving up a ton of, yardage after the catch. That's what we've seen with Darius Slay. Brandin Echols has been pretty good about keeping the play in front of him and that type of stuff. Is that all that you like about him, or are there other things you're noticing in his game that you think warrants more snaps on this defense?
I think Brandin Echols is very sticky in coverage and athletic, and I think that those are two good things to have on your side. I think he should be in over Slay right now. I think that he should. I think that especially if it's outside man duties, like if a very specific zone, I think Darius Slay could win those. But when I look at Brandin Echols, I see a guy who's young, who's passionate, who's figuring it out, who's battling, who's fighting, and I think those are all good traits to have for a cornerback. You want your cornerbacks to be feisty. So yeah, I think he's trending in the right direction. I do think they need to give him a shot.
Will be interesting to see how those snaps are divvied up this week, Chris. Thank you for stopping by today. It was good to get back in the saddle with you. Everyone else, please subscribe to the channel. Chris will be back later in the week with Brian Bacco. I believe in our normal Saturday show slot. I will be talking to Paul Zeiss both Friday, and then we will be doing the post-game show Sunday night. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And please consider checking us out at post-gazette.com for our written coverage and giving us a subscription over there. That always helps a ton. So we appreciate your support, and we will talk to you all again next week.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.